What's good, everyone? This is Physics. Uh, Looking to do my first try at this, which is going to be a video deck tech on a Cedh Yisan deck, Bard Rock Cafe. It's been around for a while now, since about 2020, its first version. Since we just had our series of pretty impactful bands in the format, in the form of Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus and Dockside and then Nadu. Those changes have been made to the list, and there's a couple new things that are being tried. But I figured I would walk through some of the pieces that are currently in the deck. Commander, Yisan the Wanderer Bard. This is my proxy I've made. This is the standard copy, but Yisan is a legendary creature, human rogue, costs 1 green, 2 colorless, a 2/3 body, and it reads: pay 2 colorless and 1 green, tap. Put a verse counter on Yisan the Wanderer Bard and search your library for a creature card with a converted mana cost equal to the number of verse counters on Yisan. Put it on the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Most people are going to be familiar with its ability and some of the finer interactions of how that works. So I guess we can start. Let's go over in Yisan form. We'll start with the verses, some of our targets, and so we'll go with verse one. These may also be things that you play out of hand, which of course we have 3 main mana dorks. Actually, it's going to be slightly more than 3, right? We have our 3 elves. Let's do it this way. 1 drop, taps for green mana. Boreal Druid, taps for colorless mana. We've got Delighted Halfling, taps for colorless as well, but has the secondary ability of adding any 1 color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. Birds of Paradise, Arbor Elf, untap target forest. This is relevant because we also run Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl, so a forest can be enchanted and be producing 2 mana. Therefore, this elf can actually produce 2 mana in those scenarios. Kyrian Ranger, longtime staple of the deck. Also an elf, but has the ability of return a force you control to its owner's hand, and then untap target creature. Activate only once each turn. So some of the tricks that the deck runs is we tend to bounce this to our hand or return to our hand so that we can reset the ability. We'll go over some of that a little bit later. Elvish Reclaimer, another very useful elf in the deck. We are very land reliant, guys. Cradle is one of the best lands in the deck. And having a tutor for it on a body that we can also tutor. It does have the downside that the land comes into the battlefield tapped, but we have ways around that if it's the combo turn. Typically, it's just good enough, though. You just tutor your Cradle at the end of turn, and then it untaps as you go into your turn. We have Sylvan Safekeeper, another staple of the deck. Protection, sacrifice a land, target creature you control gains Shroud until end of turn. You have to be careful with how you place this ability, because once that Shroud is active, certain combos that we like to enable, such as targeting your own creatures to untap them, are no longer viable if they're shrouded. It's not the same as hexproof. This is also of note, a sack outlet. If a shy is out, then your creatures are also lands, and you can use this as a sack outlet. And then we have Haywire Might, 1/1 for 1. When it dies, you gain 2 life, pay 1 green, sacrifice Haywire Might, exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Obvious target is going to be the One Ring, right? Notoriously hard to deal with regular removal. The exile helps, but you can also hit Ristic Studies, and you can hit Breach. A lot of the most powerful cards in the format are weak to this, and it's verse 1, so it's fairly easy to access or accessible if your Yisan's online. Allosaur Shepherd, some further protection. 1 mana elf for 1/1 body. Allosaur Shepherd can't be countered, and green spells you control can't be countered. It serves double function on your combo turn, simply because you can tutor it and flash it out with lines using Yeva if it looks like your win con is going to be whatever outlet you're using, right, is going to be countered. Typically by this point, it's not a big deal, but it's It is worthy of noting that sometimes either versing Allosaurus or tutoring it, casting Yeva, and casting it functions the same way a counterspell would, by countering their counter. Magus of the Candelabra. Pay X, tap it, untap X, target lands. Pretty innocuous on its own. 1/2 body. At least survives the Bowmaster test, right? This is a combo piece, but it's also a pretty decent dork. When you have, Nykthos or Gaia's Cradle or any of the manas that can produce more than just one mana. Very powerful combo piece because it doesn't require casting to loop this. Heapdaw, another 1 mana, 1/1 artifact. Sacrifice Heapdaw, exile target card from a graveyard. Good for interacting with breach lines or graveyard strategies. And then Uvenwald Tracker. So 1/1 human. But it has the ability of tapping 1 colorless, 1 green, and tapping target creature you control fights another target creature. We have a suite of removal spells that we use to try to deal with Opposition Agent and Orcish Bowmasters and any of these effects that may be interrupting our game plan. This is just one that is on a stick, on a body, so we can verse for it and have it ready to go. So this particular card, it's currently my Craterhoof. Certain metas, I still run Craterhoof as a board breaker, right? If it's a sloggy meta, a bunch of stacks, and I know I'm going to need to be able to push through, then I use it. But as of right now, this slot is going to go to Marvin, the Murderous Mimic. Artifact creature, 2 colorless. It's a 2/2, and it gains the activated abilities of every creature I control on the board. We're testing it. It seems like it's going to be good enough on its own. It does have some other cards that it plays with and can combo with. But the big advantage is that having, verse 2 at the end of a turn and getting Marvin, it does kind of project or advertise that you're going for something, but it makes it so that anything you tutor afterwards has pseudo haste, right? Because Marvin gains the ability. So if you go for a Circle of Dreams Druid on verse 3, rather than having to wait for an untap phase for that Circle of Dreams Druid to be able to produce mana, now Marvin gets that ability and can produce the mana. Same with Argothian Elder or any other piece. Additionally, it's also interesting and worthy of note that Marvin gains Yisan's abilities when Yisan's on the field, and he gets his own verse counters, right? So it works independently as to whatever verse count Yisan is on, Marvin will have its own. So you can be on 3 here, have a separate Yisan running concurrently, on verse 1. And so the relationship between the two offers some versatility in the lines. Hope Tender. So another one of our untappers, similar to Magus of the Candelabra. This particular one has 1 tap it, untap target land, 1 tap or exert Hope Tender, untap 2 target lands. This is another Ashaya combo piece. When Ashaya is in play, it becomes a land and it can target itself and any other land or mana source. As long as you're creating 2 mana, you'll be mana positive. You need the 1 to trigger its ability again of exerting, and the exert is only a factor when you can't untap it, so it doesn't affect you in your combo turn as long as it's not something sick. Pilipala, this is a really dead card right now. I'm not sure if it's going to make the list, but it's being tested. It's 2 colorless, artifact creature, scarecrow, flying. Pay 2 colorless mana, untap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's a 1/1 body. Probably the worst card in the list right now. The reason it's here is because it interacts favorably and can combo with Marvin, right? If you have a big mana dork creating 3 mana and Marvin copies that ability and can make the 3 mana, then you can have this out on the field. Marvin then gets this ability. You use 2 of that mana to untap it, netting 1 positive mana, so you can essentially go infinite using that route. Again, there is another card that does very similar things. It's called Voltaic Construct. It's a 4 mana artifact creature. It has 2 colorless ability that doesn't require a tap. It says untap this artifact creature. And so Marvin It would function the same way, but it may be optimal in the sense that for one, instead of a 1/1 body, it's a 2/2. But for two, it sequences a little bit better. And so to try to combo off using Marvin and that card, you don't need to use the Marvin Yisan triggers. If you go with the Voltaic construct, it leaves Marvin open to be able to interact or defend your combo by going verse one. Phyrexian Revoker, another CEDH classic, or at least EDH classic, 2/1 body. As it enters the battlefield, choose non-land card name. Activate abilities of sources with the chosen card name can't be activated. So hate these to stop people trying to win. You tutor it in response to try to stop a win. Soulless Jailer, another stacks piece, 2 colorless, 0/4 body is relevant. Artifact creature. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. So, anti-breach tech, anti-graveyard tech. Fauna Shaman, survival of the fittest on a stick. A little bit worse. For one, it has to not be summoning sick. And pay 1 green, tap it, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, and reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle. So it's not repeatable unless you can untap this somehow. Kangerbloom. It's a modal creature with some relevant text on it, right? 2 for 3/2 is already a decent body, but we're typically not attacking. Pay 1, sacrifice it, and you can choose between 3 abilities of destroying a target artifact, destroying an enchantment, or proliferating. That proliferate is surprisingly relevant. You can proliferate Yisan verse counters and skip through verses. You can also, there's win cons in the deck using poison counters, and if you are not able to cast spells after that initial infectious bite, then you can loop Kangerbloom to proliferate those poison counters. We'll go over that later or in another video. Death Squad's Recruiter, probably one of the most important cards in the deck. It's the primary outlet. After going infinite, you're usually versing up all the way to Woodland Bellower, and this is generally your target. This is what you pump your mana into, and it allows you to pivot throughout your deck, essentially getting whatever creatures you need to assemble your outlet or your win con, or to deal with something on the board that's keeping you from actually winning. Destiny Spinner. It's protection. Creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. But the other thing that it does, everything in this list tends to play double duty, and it has an ability of 3 colorless, 1 green. Target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control, and it's still a land. It of note is an enchantment, so it's at least going to be a 1/1. But the reason this matters is because it's a haste enabler. Whenever you have a shy out, creatures are also lands, and this allows you to activate it. And now that creature land that just came out this turn is granted the haste ability that's on this text, and allows you to do some things on your combo turn with creatures you just summoned that wouldn't be able to do so previously. Collector Oof, no rod on a body. Scrib Ranger, also a staple of this list, has flash of note, so combos using this as an untapper can be done at instant speed because of the flash. It's another what we call ranger, creatures that can return a forest to your hand and untap another target creature, and has a limitation of once per turn. This matters because when a Shaya is out, again, it becomes a forest and it can return itself, and then you just recast it. So as long as you're netting 1 more mana than the cost of this, you can go infinite. Manglehorn, another relevant stacks piece that we can tutor out to the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, it destroys target artifact, but then also artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Circle of Dreams Druid, Guy's Cradle on a stick. The body is kind of problematic. It's only a 2/1, so Orcish Bowmasters can just ping it fairly easily. But tap and 1 green mana for every creature you control is really good. So worth the risk at this point. Hyrax Tower Scout, 3, 2 colorless, 1 green for a 3/3 human scout. When it enters the battlefield, untap target creature. This can be used to skip verses with Yisan, right? So for example, if you're on verse 2 and you have the 6 mana, Pay 3, tap Yisan, go to verse 3. Then you tutor Hyrax to the battlefield. ETB trigger on the stack. You untap Yisan. And then you can use your remaining 3 mana to go to verse 4. You technically hit verse 3, but you're skipping in the sense that this allows you to untap and get another verse, albeit at the cost of 3 extra mana. Right, you need the 6. Also, Hyrax has combos. If your big mana dork or untapper is untapping a land that can, generate enough mana, then you can cast Hyrax to untap that mana dork and then use Kogla or Temur Sabertooth to bounce it back to hand because it is human, so Kogla sees it and you can recast it targeting, that creature, untapping it and generating mana again. So it's also a combo piece. Endurance was a game changer for this list. Prior to Endurance being printed, we were experimenting with some loops that would allow you to win without casting spells. Endurance tied all of that together. All-Star card, Flash, you can cast it for free by exiling a green card from your hand, 3/4 body. I mean, this thing is incredible. But the biggest thing it does is when it enters the battlefield, up to one target player puts all the cards from their graveyard on the bottom of their library in a random order. It can be used in a pinch to stop, breach lines or reanimations, Savine's Wreck, a slew of things. But it can also be used in your own loops, specifically Bog Bonder loops in this list, which we'll go over probably in a separate video because it's kind of in detail. Eternal Witness, green staple, also a human of note. So not only can Temur Sabertooth bounce it and loop spells using its ability, but you can do it with Kogla as well. Dosen, the Falling Leaf. It's a 3 mana 2/2 human monk. Players can only play spells during their turns. This is our Silence, our Grand Abolisher in mono green. Just be very careful. This is not something you cast and then pass the turn. This is used very judicially, usually flashed in at the end of the opponent's turn that's right before you. That way, if they can't respond or interact with you at the end of their turn, you pass on to your turn free of interaction. And so, very few things can get past that. Obviously, activated abilities can, but it offers a reasonable amount of protection for your combo. Yeva, 4 mana, flash, and then it allows you to cast green creature cards as though they had flash. Important in the sense that this is one of the components of the deck that allows you to win at instant speed. There's an alternative. I tend to run both because of the redundancy, but Yeva's is half of that winning combination that allows you to position and move your win attempts when they feel the safest or they make the most sense. Instead of your traditional main phase, bunch of creatures on board, crater hoof attacks that Yisan was prone to. Argothian Elder, 2/2 body, it taps, untap 2 target lands. Under Ashaya, this is another combo piece. It becomes a land, so you can untap it and another land, and it's the most compact win con combo there is. It not only creates infinite mana, but infinite untaps that can be used on Yisan to move your way up through the verses. Temur Sabertooth, also classic part of this deck. Allows you to pay 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 green to return creatures to your hand and reuse them. Slippery Bog Bonder, game-changing text, right? It has flash, also has hexproof. When it enters the battlefield, put a hexproof counter on target creature and then move any number of counters from among the creatures you control to that. Again, this has its own series of loops and lines that utilize endurance and a sack outlet. But it's a incredible card for Yisan specifically. It does some awesome things. Seedborn Muse, untap all your permanents during each other players' untap step. This is a game-winning card if you have a decent board state. If you power this out early, you have a Yisan on board. I mean, by the time it gets back to your turn, you could have the win on the table. So generally, it's a must kill. Doesn't hurt you too bad when it's gone, right? But if it sticks around, it can help you get immense value. Ashaya. This is actually the most important card in the deck. Ashaya changed the combos that Yisan runs, streamlined a lot of things. Incredible card. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. And then star. 5 mana. This is our main combo outlet. A lot of our combos revolve around casting Ashaya. Woodland Bellower is basically our pseudo outlet. After we have gone infinite with Ashaya on the field, then we can go to verse 6, go get Woodland Bellower, which then tutors Duskwatch Recruiter or some other outlet to the battlefield directly and allows us to try to win. Then Kogla, 6 mana. When it ETBs, it fights up to 1 creature I don't control. And then whenever it attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. It has the 1 colorless, 1 green. Return target human you control to its owner's hand. And it gains indestructible until end of turn. It's got a relevant body. It's a 7/6. So it can hit a lot of things and kill them. But it's also a combo piece and redundancy for Temur Sabertooth. Let's go to the artifact package. Relatively small here, especially since we've lost Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt. So our turn 1 Yisans are going to be a lot more rare. Basically non-existent. But this deck doesn't really care about speed. I mean, it's nice to get an early start and be online as early as possible, but you care a little more about consistency and resiliency. And so to that end, if you had 1 forest or 1 land and a Jeweled Lotus, if you don't get the proper amount of mana by the following turn, you're not going to have the ability to activate Yisan anyway, so it's pointless to have them out that early. So one of the decks that didn't get hit as hard as some of the others by these bans, but we have your standard Soul Ring. We're going to have Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, and then Chalice of the Void, one of our preferred stacks pieces. The deck used to run a lot more stacks components, but the decks have just gotten fast enough to where they haven't really made sense. We'll see how the meta shapes up after these bans, especially with Dockside being out. A lot of our game plan was to interfere with those game plans, and so Dockside basically made effects like Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon obsolete because they could get around that with Dockside not being around anymore. Even Winter Orb or Winter Moon may be viable again because they can't just power out treasures. Trinisphere, still in the list for me. Can be a little awkward sometimes, right? Because some of our combos require us to cast and loop things like Curian Ranger. And so if your Curian Ranger, which normally costs 1 mana, or your Scrib Ranger that costs 2 is now costing 3 mana, if you're not making enough mana on the other end, then it stops you as well. But we can break parity with it with our combos because we do have combos that are based on activated abilities, are untappers, and don't require any casts. Very good early protection. Sometimes you cast it before Yisan if you're early in turns in the sequence. And just keep in mind that sometimes you have to destroy it yourself to make sure that other players can interact and stop your opponents, because being mono green, we don't always have the best solutions on the stack. We are a toolbox, and we are going to be able to activate Yisan to respond for some things, but we don't want to take that burden on to ourselves and try to stop everything. We're trying to stop game-winning attempts, and then if those events don't happen or they're stifled by someone else, then we proceed our game plan by tutoring a target that progresses our combo instead of interacting with the opponent. To that note, we've got Null Rod, also a staple in the list. We'll proceed. We have some enchantments we run. Survival of the Fittest. staple reserve list green card. Lets you tutor using other creatures that you pitch to the root maze. Another stacks piece. If you get this down early, it's pretty game breaking. So for multicolored decks, we specifically don't run any fetches. One, because of opposition agent, but two, because we want to leverage the tempo we can get if we manage to get an early root maze. It's back-breaking to a lot of decks to have to play through a root maze. It loses a little bit of its pizzazz now that, there's no dock sides to stop, but still a really good card if it's out, in a relevant amount of time. And then Utopia Sprawling Wild Growth, ways of getting Yisan out, turn 2 generally. You enchant a forest or land and they make extra green mana. We got some sorceries. Natural Order, you sack a green creature as part of the cost, and search your library for a green creature card and put it directly to the battlefield and then shuffle your library. It lets you power out either a relevant stacks piece or a portion of your winning combo without having to go all the way through the versus with Yisan. Sylvan Scrying, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. You're going to get Cradle a lot of times with this. There's a lot of utility lands in this deck, so that you may be interested in getting something else, but 9 times out of 10, you're getting your Cradle with that. It's a cheap land tutor. Nylea's Intervention. It's a modal spell, so it's green, and X, and search your library for up to X land cards, reveal them and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Or the second mode is Nylea's Intervention deals twice X damage to each creature with flying. So there are some relevant flying creatures in the format, but usually you're going to tutor Gaia's Cradle or a combination of lands to hand to try to enable a win. Greenstone Zenith, another staple. It lets you search for a green creature, pay 1 and 0 on X. So for 1 mana, you can, turn 1, go get Dryad Arbor, or a combo piece later in the game. Finale of Devastation. At this point, this is also a staple. 2 green and X. It allows you to search for a creature card with a converted mana cost X or less and put into the battlefield. And if X is 10 or more creatures you control get +X and gain haste. So it is an outlet, a finisher, right? You can cast or use Yisan to get a bunch of your creatures out onto the battlefield and then use an arbitrarily large amount of mana to grant them all haste and, do a fatal strike to the opponents. And then Bridge Work Battles. This is a newer card, but it's one of the alternate lands that flip. On the front, it has a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 till end of turn and fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. It's more green removal. Costs 2 colorless, 1 green. The rear is a land, a mana source that allows you to pay 3 life so that it doesn't come in tapped, and taps for green mana. The Invasion of Ikoria, it's a siege. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or graveyard for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less, and then put it onto the battlefield. When it flips, you have Zalortha, Apex of Ikoria. It's a 8/8 with reach, and for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign combat damage as though it wasn't blocked, so helps with an alpha strike. I've never flipped it. And then we have our instant suite. Legolas's Quick Reflexes, has split second, untap target creature, and until end of turn it gains hexproof reach, and whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. Bouncer's Beatdown, removal, essentially. It deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. Costs 2 less to cast if it's targeting a black permanent of note. Veil of Summer, protection for when we're trying to combo, not be interacted with by blue or black. Infectious Bite is an all-star. This replaced Ram Through. There were lines specifically revolving around this card. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature and that you don't control, and then each opponent gets a poison counter. So you can actually kill all of your opponents at instant speed by looping, Infectious Bite, poisoning them out. Force of Vigor, green staple at this point. Archdruid's Charm, another modal spell, lets you search for a land and put it onto the battlefield. Or you can put a 1/1 counter on a target creature and it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So another fight spell. Or it can exile target artifact or enchantment. So the One Ring again, something like that. Tail Swipe, more removal. It's a fight spell, instant speed. Beast Within, right? I think most of us know what this is. Destroy target permanent. They get a token. Worldly Tutor, search your library for a creature card, and then reveal that card, right? Shuffle it, put it on top. Court of Calling, another tutor. Crop Rotation for our land package, right? Or to get Cradle. And then Summoner's Pact. And then we have our mana base, right? So Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, makes all of our lands forests in addition to its other types. War Room has an ability where you can pay 3, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color. Identity and draw a card. So us being green, we pay 1 to draw a card. If you can tap and untap this at will, you build your own mini Adnos, essentially. Nykthos, mass mana producer if your board state's in the right place. Ominous Cemetery. It's a colorless land, but has a second mode where you can exile it and then target creature's owner shuffles it into their library. So get rid of problematic things like Orcish Bowmasters or Opposition Agent. Cradle, as Cradle, mainstay in the deck. Nikokoro. I go back and forth between which one's better, between Mikokoro being your draw land, right? It helps as a snake, a rattlesnake against a Thassa's Oracle type win. Can also help the table dig for answers. And you can also loop it post infinite to try to win that way. If you have the right board state and can keep your opponents from gaining any kind of leverage on you, you can place infinite draw triggers on the stack before any of those triggers resolve. And then your job is to make sure that they're in a position where they can't interact with you or do anything as those triggers resolve one-on-one. If they do cast a spell, then you bury it in more triggers, right? It stays on the stack. You place another arbitrarily large amount of triggers on the stack using your established board state to suppress what they're doing until you draw everybody out. Talon Gates of Madro. Main reason is here is because you can tutor it to the battlefield using any of your land tutors or Elvish Reclaimer, and it allows you to phase out a creature, your own, or like a Dranith, keeping you from casting Yisan or something. Boseiju, pretty much a staple at this point. Channel lets you discard it. It's an activated ability, so it's not a spell that can be countered. And it lets you destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land that an opponent controls. Redhorn Pass is a reprinting of Malthuranum. More land-based creature removal. Requires snow lands to do this, so the forests that I run in here are all snow forests. Shifting Woodlands. It has an ability that requires Delirium active, but it becomes a target, a copy of any target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. You can activate only if there are 4 or more card types amongst the cards in your graveyard, the Delirium clause. But, if something's been killed and it's sitting in the yard, Shifting Woodlands is sometimes a sneaky way to be able to win, even though a permanent you needed got killed. Plaza of Heroes lets you use color to cast legendary spells. Also lets you create mana of any legendary permanent you control, and then you can exile it, and target legendary creature gets hexproof and indestructible, so protection from Yisan. Versatile land. Gemstone Caverns, CDH staple. Ursa's Cave is new. You can pay 3, tap it, sacrifice, and search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, so another version of Cradle, even though you have to jump through some hoops. Ancient Tomb, another CDH staple. Dryad Arbor, target for Green Sun. Zenith 1/1. Good to use with Cradle. Castle Garenbrig, another utility land that can make more mana than than you pump into it, right? So it lets you go mana positive. There are scenarios in which you can use this because the mana has a condition that can only be spent to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. But you can filter that mana using something like Magus, other Candelabra, or Hope Tender. You use the activated mana to untap lands, and it allows you to filter that mana if you went infinite with it. Green Dragon Inn, Homeward Path, lets you get your creatures back if somebody drakes them. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 snow-covered forests for, I think, a total of 31 lands currently, including the modal lands, the mana base. So a couple things that may end up in the list or may get tested is now that we don't have Crypt and we don't have Jeweled Lotus, we've increased the land count, and we may be looking at burgeoning again as a way to try to get earlier Yisans. But we'll see. A lot of testing still has to be done. This is the list as it stands right now. I'll make a separate video going over some of the combos, how to go infinite. But if you liked it, leave a comment, give a like. If you have any questions, drop your questions. Come visit us in the Yisan Discord. Very active server with a lot of ideas and a lot of people working on things constantly. Have a good one.